One of the best ways to learn React is by creating reusable component. In this video, we're going to create from scratch a grid component using React TypeScript SCSS and Storybook to document it. But before getting started, let's take a look at the final product. As you can see here, we have 4 columns. When the screen gets smaller, it's going to be 3, 2, and 1. But we're going to create a component that supports 12 grid columns, and we're also going to create a ruler to guide the user when using the component. And we're also going to add props like JustifyContent and AlignItems to let the user change some of the common styling without using CSS. There are so many things to do, so let's get started. Let's open the terminal. You can do that with Visual Studio Code. In here, in the folder of your choice, let's say npx create React app. We're going to create a new React app and name it grid component. In here, we're going to use TypeScript. So let's say template and TypeScript. Let's wait for it to install. Now that it's done, let's go into the folder by saying cd grid component. In here, let's install some of the package that we're going to use. And I'm going to say npm. Let's install Nosas. I'm also going to add class names. If you don't know class name and you haven't used that before, you can go to npm page and look for it and to know what it does. And I'm also going to add types as we're using TypeScript. So it's going to say class names. And let's wait for it to install as well. Now when it's done, let's open the project. In Visual Studio Code, you can say code dot, and then it's going to open a new folder with the project. So let's close this and make it bigger. In here, let's go to terminal. And we can start the project by saying npm start. But before doing that, I want to make sure that every package is installed. So I'm going to say npm install first. Now when it's done, let's say npm start to start the project. When it's started, you can find the app in the localhost 3000. But before we actually started to code, let's go to the source folder and delete some of the file that we are not going to use. So let's delete this file as well as the app.css and the app test. In the app, let's remove these 2 files that we're not using and remove the header, and instead let's just say app for now. Yep. And let's see if it works. So let's remove these files that we're not going to use. And let's save this. And now all we see in the browser is only the word app that we have in the app.tsx. So first thing we want to do is to go to the index.css and say box sizing border box. I want to have something inside the grid. So I'm going to create a box component. So under component, let's create a new folder and name it box. Under box, let's create 2 new files. The first one would be box.tsx and the other one would be box.module.scss. In the box.css, let's import React and let's create a new constant. It's going to be box. This one would be a functional component, and it's going to take in the children as a prop. The children would be React node, and this would equal to a new function. The function would take in children and return a div with children inside, and let's export it by default. Yep, so we want to use the styles from the box.module. So let's say style from box module.scss. and let's use that in the div by saying class name equal to style.box. Right, in the box.module.scss, let's create a new class, name it box, and I'm going to copy the style over. And in the app, let's just use the box to see what it looks like. So let's say box number 1, and let's import it. So it's just a blue box with some shadow. The next step we want to do is to create a grid component. So again, in the component folder, let's create a new folder, name it grid. In here, let's create two new files, grid.tsx and grid.module.scss. Let's do the same thing in the box. Import the React from React. Remove this, and we want to create a new constant grid. It also a functional component, and it also going to check children as a pop. This is going to be equal to a function, and also return a div with children inside. Right, let's export that by default as well. Alright, and let's also import the style from the grid model. Right, in the grid, I want to have two props. The first one I'm going to add is a container, and it's going to be optional prop, and it's going to be boolean, and it's going to be the same for the item. Let's also pass it to the function. So what I want to do with these two prop is that if there is container, if container is equal to 2, I want to give it a grid underscore container class, and if item is equal to 2, I want to give it a grid underscore item class. So we can do that by create a new constant and name it class names, and we're going to use the class name that we have installed at the beginning. So let's say cn from class name, and in here let's just say cn, it is a function, and let's pass in an object. The first one would be the style and the grid underscore container, we only give it if the container is equal to 2, and the same thing would be for the item. Right, let's use this class name inside the div. So class name equal to class names. Right, so in the grid.module.scss, let's create a new class, and we have the container. In here, let's say display flex, and the item would be display block. So let's use that in the app, and after that I'm going to explain what the hell just happened. So grid container, let's import this, and let's create a new grid here as well, but name it but give the prop item equal to 2. Let's pass in the box number 1. Let's create two new box, so box 2 and box 3. So let's open the inspect and go to the grid. So in here, you can see that for the container, if I pass the container to be true, it's going to give this div a grid container class, and the other three, which has item equal to true, is going to have the grid_item class. And because we're using module.scss, you can see that it has special ID, so that if you give the same class to other component, it would generate different ID, so it's never going to be overlap. So that's why I love CS module so much. But yeah, now we have the container and item props. The next thing I want to do is to tell how many columns does each box take. So I want to give the first item, let's say it's going to take 3 columns out of 12, and it's going to be the same with other box as well. So now if I save it, it's showing some error over here. So let's add a new props in the grid. So let's say column, but in here the column would take the value from number 1 to number 12. So let's create a new type and name it columns, and it's going to be 1 or 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, or 12. Wow, that was tedious. But anyway, let's use the columns in here, and let's pass the column here as well. Yeah, so we can do the same thing like the item and the container by just saying columns and columns here. So if there's column, then we're going to give it this class. But what I want to do is that I want to create 12 classes with the column underscore the number of the column it would take from the 12 column. For example, like if I want to give it like number 4, right? So in here, if I go to grid.model.scss and create a new class, column number 4, if the box or if the grid item has this class, I'm going to say flex basis, and it's going to take 25%, because 25% is equal to like 4 divided by 12 and multiplied by 100%, right? So it's the same thing with if I say column number 3 and column underscore 3, then it should be 3 out of 12, and I'm going to create like 12 class with the same pattern like this. So we can do that by saying for I from 1 to 12, no, from 1 to 13, because it's not going to take the last number. I'm going to, let's copy this and paste in here. I'm going to use the index I, and let's say it's going to be I divided by 12 and multiplied by 100%. So with this function, it's going to create like column underscore 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 until 12, right? And it would do the calculation here. So let's delete this. And in order to make this work, we need to go to the grid and say in here that we want to have the columns in here, but now it does not work, so we need to use a string, a backtick string in this case. So let's say this. So if I save it now, it is working that this box take, let's check it out. This box should take, let's go back to the grid item, 25%. So if I say this box should take 1 out of 12, So 1 divided by 12 and then multiply by 100%. So it could be 8% around. So it's the same with, I just say 12 is going to be 100%, right? So I hope that you get the point. But now if I say, let's say 6, and add a new box and add it a column 6 as well. Now everything like on the same row, and each of them still take 50, which is wrong. In order to fix that, we need to go back to the container and say flex wrap and wrap. So now it will always take the maximum of 100% each row. So box 1 50%, box 2 50%, box 3 50%, and you get the point. Right, so now we have it. The next thing we want to do is to add some spacing between different boxes. To better visualize, I'm going to add some margin in the app. So let's say margin, let's say 16 pixels. Right, so let's go back to our grid. I'm going to have a new pops, call it spacing, and it's going to be a spacing type, which we don't have it, but we're going to create it at the moment. Spacing. Right, so let's create a new type and call it spacing. As this one would equal to either small, medium, or large, right? So let's also use that in the function. In here we could do the same thing like we just did with the column. We're just going to copy this, and instead of column, let's call it spacing. And in here, let's also say spacing. So it's going to, so what we want to do is create 3 new class instead of 12. So let's go to our CSS. What we want to do is to create a new class like spacing underscore small, for example, and we're going to select every item, inside it. So let's say item, and we want to give the item a size of padding 8 pixels, for example. And it does not work yet because we don't have the pop in the grid now. So let's just add spacing equal to small. So now it adds the padding for each box or each item 8 pixels, right? So we want to do the same thing with the medium and the large. For the medium, we're going to give it like, for example, 16 pixels, and for the large, we're going to give it 24 pixels. But these are repeated and have the same pattern, so we can use a bit of SAS syntax, and let's create an array. Call it what should we call? We call it spacing. This spacing would be an array, and the first one would be small, and it's going to be 8 pixels. The second one is medium, 16 pixels, and the last one would be large, 24 pixels. And in here we're going to say for each for each name and value in the spacing list, we want to create a new class name and use the name here and give the padding the value. Right, so let's remove this, and now it should work the same way. So for example, if we change this to medium, the spacing, the gap will be bigger, and in here we say large, it's working perfectly. But yeah, let's go back to small gap. So let's inspect the element a bit. So if we look at the app, the content is not the same with with the grid. So in order to fix that, we can say spacing, and we're going to give it margin equal to minus the value. So now if we go back to the app, you can see that the app content has the same width with the grid, and that's what we want. We only want the gap to be between the boxes. So the next step is to make this responsive, but before doing it, let's create a grid ruler to help the user visualize while developing. So in the component, let's create a new folder and name it grid ruler. In here, similar with the grid and the box, let's create two new files and name it grid ruler .tsx and grid ruler .module.scss. In the grid ruler, let's import React from React, and let's create a new constant grid ruler. It's going to be again a functional component, and this is not going to take any prop. So it's going to equal to a function, and let's return a div. In here, we want to first, let's export that first. So in the div, we want to have 12 div represent 12 column. So we can do it by saying an array from 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, and 12. I promise this is the last time we count in this video, but I don't know yet. Let's hope for it. So let's map through it, and for each number, we're going to return a div. Right. So there is something wrong going on. Yeah, so let's import the style from the grid ruler.module.scss. In here, let's give the outer div a class name. Let's say style.gridRuler underscore. Let's just give it for now. And for the inner div, let's give it a class name of underscore item, and also give it a key of the number. In the CSS, let's create a new class and name it grid ruler. In here, let's give it a display grid, and let's create 12 columns. So we can say grid template column. We're going to repeat 12 times one fraction, and I'm going to give it a position absolute, and let's go to the app and use it before the grid. So let's say grid ruler, also give the app and position relative. So now the display absolute should work, and let's go back to the grid ruler. So for every item, we want to have a background color of, let's say, RGBA. It's going to be black, but the opacity would be 0.1. Right. And we want to give it a width of 100% to the container. So let's see if it works. So now it does work, but it does not have any height. So we can say height 100 view height. So now you can see that we have something up here, but because it does not have any gap between, so we cannot see anything. So let's go to our grid.model.css and let's copy this spacing because we want to use that in the width ruler as well. So let's paste it in here. So similar with the grid, let's map through them. So each name and value in this spacing. We want to create a new class, and this time it's going to be again spacing, and it's gonna take in the name and give it a gap of the value. But with the grid, we use the gap as a padding, so this gap would be equal to 2 times the spacing, right? So we want to double the size by 2. So now if we save that, we need to tell the component which class to take when we have the pop. So in here, let's create a new pop. It's called spacing, and again it's going to be the same in the grid. So I go to grid and copy this spacing, and let's paste it in here. And this could be spacing here, and it's gonna take spacing, and also it should be an optional. So now let's again use the class name. So in here, let's create a new constant, class names is equal to class name, and let's import that. In here, let's create a new object. And similarly in the grid, let's say style is going to use, let's use a string grid ruler underscore spacing underscore the spacing if there is spacing. Right, let's use that in here. But because the ruler also have another class, so let's copy this and paste it before the object. So let's go to the app, and in the grid ruler, let's say spacing equal to small. Right, so now we have the ruler and it's looking quite good, and it also should work if we change the spacing to be medium. Right, it's working quite well. Yeah, so let's change back to small. So the next step is to make the grid responsive. So our goal is to have something like, if I'm in a mobile view which is extra small, then I want to take 12 column. If I'm on tablet or a bigger screen, I want to have let's say 6 column. But if I am laptop, I want to take 4 column, and if I'm on desktop, I want to take 3 column, right? And let's copy this to other item as well. And we can see here that now it does not work anymore because we don't have these prop in the grid. So let's go to the grid and change the color to be extra small, and let's add 3 other small, medium, and large, and let's also use that here. Right, and it's going to work the same way, so just copy those and change the column, the first column to be extra small. This one would be small, medium, and large. Right, so now we have the class name. Now the next step is to make it actually work. So we're going to try the mobile first method. But first we need to know our breakpoint. So let's create a new list and let's call it breakpoint. And in here we're going to have first one, a small breakpoint. It's going to be 600. The second one would be 960, and the last one would be 1280 pixels. Oh, it's going to be bracket, not curly bracket. Right. Now we have the breakpoint on the smallest screen size, which is smaller than 600, which we are in right now. We want the extra small prop to work, so we just need to change the column to be extra small. And now you can see that every box takes 12 columns. So let's move on to the second breakpoint, which is between 600 and 960. So it's about this size. So the first thing I want to do is to create a new mixin, and I'm going to name it breakpoint, and it's going to take in a name, and in here I want to use media query, and I'm going to use min width, and it's going to take in the the breakpoint, so we need to use the map get. The list here is the breakpoint. Actually, breakpoint to make more sense, so let's say breakpoint, and the key here is the name, and inside is going to be the content. Right. So we want to use this breakpoint mixin in here. So let's say include, and let's use the breakpoint function. It here is going to take in first small. By saying this, it's going to replace this map get with 600 pixel. So in that, let's copy this block and paste it inside and change it to be small. Right. So now in the second breakpoint, it's going to every box gonna take 6 columns, and it does not matter the size of the screen. Right. So the next step is to handle the space between 960 and 1280. So it's about this size. And it's going to be same thing, and it need to change it to be medium, and now you can see it working. And the last one is going to be large. And you can see here that it's working like we expected, and also these codes are repeated, but I'm going to leave it for you to improve it. So the next step is to add JustifyContent and AlignItems to our grid. So let's go to our grid.tsx and let's add JustifyContent as a prop, and it's going to be optional, and it's going to be a type JustifyContent. And let's create a new type. And this is going to be either flex start or center or flex end or space between. Right. So let's also pass it in the function. And this is going to work similarly to the spacing. So let's copy that and change it to be JustifyContent. Now we have the class, and let's move to our CSS. The first thing we want to do in here is to create a new list. This one would be JustifyContent, and it's going to be flex start of flex and center or space between. Right, so for each value in the justify content, we want to create a new class, say justify content underscore the value, and justify content, and it's going to be the value itself. And now we need to go to the app, and let's try to say justify content equal to center. And in order to see something different, we need to change the extra small to be equal to 1. And now you can see that all the box is being centered. And if I say flex n here, it's going to be aligned to the end of the row. And if I say space between, every box would have the same space between them. So it's working like we expected. Let's move on to our align items. So it's going to be the same. Let's just copy that quickly. And instead of justify content, it's going to be align items. And it's not going to have the space between. And in here, let's create another pop. It's called align items, optional align items. And in here, let's just pass it to the function as well. Let's copy this because it's going to be the same. Instead of justify content, I'm going to say align item. It's a typo here. And yeah. So now I think we have it. Let's go to our CSS. So in our CSS, let's copy this and change justify content to be align item. It does not have the space between, so let's delete this. And let's copy this as well. And instead of justify content, let's say align items. And in here is going to be align item. And actually there's a typo here. Right, so now we have it. Let's go to our app and say align item equal to, for example, center. So it does not work yet. The reason is because the grid does not have any height. So I want to say here the app should have a height of let's say 100 view height, and the grid going to take a height of 100%. So we get string. Right, so now the TypeScript is complaining that the grid does not have the prop style. So we need to go to the grid, and we want to say that every prop that you pass to the grid, I'm going to use that for the div. So now we save that. It is working, but in order to let the TypeScript know that the props is now being passed to the div, we can say, let's copy this and paste it in here and this. Right, so now everything should be fine. The next step is to work with our storybook. So let's move on. So let's create a new tab and search for install storybook. And let's check on the first one. And all we have to do is copy this and open the terminal. And let's create a new tab in the terminal and just paste it inside. And let's wait for it to install. So now when the storybook is successfully installed, all we have to do is say npm run storybook. Now on the port 6006, we can see the storybook. And we also can see some of the example that storybook come with it, but we don't want this. We want to create our own story. So in our grid folder, we want to create a new file, and we're going to name it grid.stories.tsx. And in this story, I'm going to copy this button story in the grid story and remove all the stories, the example stories. So in here, let's try to fix the error. Let's remove this and also the comment. The title would be grid and the component would be grid. So let's import that. We don't need the argument type, so remove it. And we don't need any of these, so remove that as well. We want to export a new constant and it's going to be basic. We don't need the button pop. We don't want the button here, so let's go to the app and copy everything and replace it to the button. So now we want, for this argument, I want to pass it to the grid. So in here, let's say argument, and we don't want this class name, we don't want the margin, we don't want the height, we only want the position to be relative. And let's import this and the box as well. So now if everything correctly, it should work. Right, so now we have what we expected, and instead of 1 here, I want to change it to be 12. Yep, so now it works, and let's try out the bigger screen. You can see here in the bigger screen it does not work, it does not behave like we expected. So remember that we have the box sizing border box for every element, so we want to add it to the storybook as well. So under .storybook folder, we want to create a new file and name it reset.css. In here, we're going to reset every element to have box sizing border box, and we want to use that in the preview. So let's import the reset.css. Now you can see that it is working like we expected. So let's go back to our story. I want to create 2 new stories. So let's copy this basic and paste it 1 time. And instead of basic, we want to say with ruler. This story would have the ruler, but the first one, let's remove that and save it. And we're going to paste it another time, and this one we're going to name it interactive. In here, let's also remove the ruler and change the extra small to be 1 instead of 12, and also remove the small, medium, and large. So now if we save that and we go to the storybook, we can say that now with ruler would appear. And the different thing is that with the basic, we don't see the ruler, and with the ruler, we see the ruler. And for the interactive, we can see here that in the control, there would be some option just a justify content and align item. So if I say justify content to be center, it could be center horizontally. And if we say here that align item center, we have the same problem. So what we want to fix in here, we say height to be 100 view height. So let's wait for the storybook to reload. Now you can see that if we change the justify content to center, it will be center. Same with the align item. Right, so everything works perfectly. The next step is to deploy this storybook. So in order to deploy the website, the first thing we need to do is to create a new repo in the GitHub. So in the github.com/new, I want to create a new repo. I name it grid React component. Let's make it public. And in here, we need to go back to our Visual Studio Code. And let's go back here. And let's open terminal. Let's say git init and git add, and let's commit it and give it a first commit. And let's go to the main branch. So let's say git branch m main. And now we need to copy the remote. So let's copy this. And that's pretty much it. And let's say git push. So let's copy this and paste it. Now we have the grid React component. What we can do is going to Netlify. So let's go to netlify.com and log in. Let's create a new site from Git and choose GitHub. And let's search for grid React and choose the repo. In here we want to say yarn build storybook, and the public directory would be storybook static. Right, so now we just need to keep deploying, and let's wait for it to deploy. After it's deployed, you would have your own URL to the website, and it should look the same as in the local host. And with that, it concludes our video. If you like the video, don't forget to hit the thumbs up and the subscribe button. And if you want to have more challenges, check out devchallenges.io and follow me on Twitter. And other than that, until next time, and happy coding.